Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Board of Education meeting on May 27th. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Right behind you.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first of all, can I have a motion to move out of executive session?
So moved.
Linda, second.
I'll
Janice,
second
all in favor? Thank you. We also, in examining the agenda, we have an item to add. Can I have a motion, please, to add a settlement agreement and a due process hearing that will occur after the interim superintendent's report?
For our student.
For a student, yes. Moved by Maria and a second by Janice. All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. So welcome, everyone. We understand there's been a lot of frustration and misinformation within the community. However, boards of education are not the decision-making body for school closing or reopening, nor are we responsible for masking policy. The New York State Department of Health issues guidance, which school districts are obligated to follow. If they update public mask school requirements, we will share those guidelines, and until then, we appreciate everyone's cooperation. We will honor the amendment to our policy regarding public comment for the remainder of this year, which would be this evening, June 3rd and June 10th, which is a workshop. The board appreciates the comments of the community during the public session, and every individual that speaks has a vested interest in the education of our students. Your comments are important to us, and concerns raised will be referred to the district administration for follow-up or action when appropriate. The board will not be responding to comments during the session, but please be assured we are listening. Finally, we ask that all individuals during their speaking time to model the conduct we expect from our students in school daily. Please be respectful of others, of your words, of your conduct, and your demeanor. Thank you. Cindy, if you would like to welcome the speakers who have signed up for this evening.
Ashley Dastick.
I have a first.
Welcome.
Can you guys hear me? I have a first grader at DeWitt Road School, and I have younger students that will be going to the school. So let me start by saying I've taken COVID very seriously. I followed the mandates and wore my mask. I even reluctantly received my vaccine, as I do trust science. To quote almost every COVID-related email we have received to date, many from our former superintendent, we must follow the science. Here is where I'm at a loss. What science and metrics are we using to continue to mask our children? I urge this Board of Education and area superintendents to demand this information and present it to the parents at the next board meeting. We owe this to our children. Let me read from a letter I recently sent our governor and Department of Health. Based on statistics from the CDC website, there have been 574,000 COVID deaths. I'm not going to tell you like every last number, but 574,000 COVID deaths of any age in the U.S. Of those deaths, 213 of them have been children from ages 0 to 14. In that same time period, January 1st, 2020 to May 19th, 2021, there have been 24,000 COVID deaths of any age in New York State, excluding New York City. Not a single death in children ages 0 to 14. New York City had 28,000 deaths of any age. 13 were from children 5 to 14, and there was no data on potential and likely comorbidities that wasn't available. I was unable to find statistics from 2020 or 2021, but according to a 2018 publication from the New England Journal of Medicine, there were 20,000 adolescent deaths in the U.S. in 2016. 12,000 were from injuries, 4,000 were from motor vehicle accidents, and 3,100 were firearm related. According to the census, the U.S. has a population of 328 million and 19 million in New York State. 12% of the U.S. population are children 0 to 9, and 11% of the New York State population is 0 to 9, which is 2.1 million children. So based on my research that I've done, because I've called the governor's office and the New York State Department of Health every day this week and asked for science and metrics about children and transmission and risks to children. And Superintendent Neenan has told me that over 82% of our staff are now vaccinated. They've all had the opportunity and ample time to be vaccinated. So I was under the impression we were masking our children to protect our staff, who are now fully protected 100% from hospitalization and death. So there have been 213 total U.S. COVID deaths, which is 0.0000054% of children ages 0 to 14. There's 13 total COVID deaths in New York State, which is 0.00006% of children in New York State. And there have been 0 deaths in children 0 to 14 in New York State. 0, none. I beg of this board, I realize you don't make the mandates, but you enforce them and you uphold them within our school. And I urge this board to question where the science is coming from, to advocate for our students who are masked completely unreasonably. And whether you believe it or not, there are detrimental and negative effects to masking. Dentists will tell you so, social emotionally. Please provide me with some facts by the next board meeting around your mandate to require children in school to continue to wear masks. All teachers who desire to be vaccinated have had ample time. What is the transmission rate within schools or situations where children are unmasked? What is the transmission rate when children are outside versus inside? I called the CDC, I called New York State, and I called the Department of Health. No one has that information available, but you're a school board of a large, awesome school district, and you can band together with the other huge districts. Kathleen Grotman agrees. Hopefully seek out that information if you're going to continue to enforce masking on our children. There's 0 data showing that schools or children's outdoor activities have had any effect on community transmission. Fairport no longer requires their students to mask outdoors in this oppressive heat. I would urge you to remove the outdoor requirement immediately and then follow up on the rest as soon as possible. One death is too many and very sad, but nothing in life is risk-free. We're training our children to fear each other and life itself. I'm a pediatric speech pathologist, and I could go on about the special needs population and how I feel this is impacting our children's social and pragmatic language development, even more so those children with speech and language difficulties. We don't have time for this, and it's unnecessary to even discuss. None of these children need masks to keep each other safe or the vaccinated adults who teach them. Show us the science that is keeping our children masked and start doing what's best for our children by demanding these answers and making your own choices and guidelines for this district. After all, Cuomo has said these are just recommendations for the boards to enforce. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Dwallaby. Jill Joy. Sure, that's fine. Yes, welcome.
My name's Jill Joy, and I have 3 kids. My 2 oldest attend Plank North. And this school year, I chose remote for my kids. I think there's a misconception that parents chose remote because they're afraid of COVID, but that's not the case. As for me, I chose remote because I'm afraid of you and your policies. I chose remote because I refuse to mask my kids all day. I chose remote because I refuse to do unnecessary medical procedures on my kids like COVID testing. I chose remote because I refuse to give my children unnecessary anxiety and fear. It's no wonder that part of your budget is going to therapists for these kids. You have contributed to their anxiety and their fear, and now, a year and a half later, now you want to attempt to help them. Take the masks off these kids, Let them continue school normally, the way it should be, and you will have saved a lot of money. And who are you taking your orders from? Cuomo, a sexual predator and a mass murderer of at least 15,000 people in nursing homes? So we should trust your guidance, the safety of our children, when this is who you're taking direction from. Or do you take direction from Mendoza, a guy who walked into court and said on the record that he has no say in what each district does, that he merely offers guidance, but the schools don't have to take it? Is that who you're listening to? Or are you still following Gamina's plan? So which one of these people is dictating what you do? And what's the payout to Gamina? Is that coming from your newly passed budget? And why didn't he have to pay the $22,000 penalty? I know you're going to say that it's your policy not to answer questions, but I think that's just your way of avoiding them. You changed your policy on speakers and on having them to give a week's notice. You've waived your policy on that, so I think you're free to waive your policy on answering questions at this meeting. You promised full transparency, and it's time that you do it. We've all heard the mandate brought down on daycares and day camps for 2 to 5-year-olds that they had to mask all day, every day. The parents and the providers came together and became a unified front to combat this mandate. They advocated with these kids, and within a day, this mandate was reversed. All of their so-called science was out the door. And it's amazing what can happen when people work together and advocate for the kids. But I think that it's pretty clear that your number one concern is not the kids, it's yourselves. As long as your 6-figure salaries are coming in, you'll enforce masking and you'll enforce a required vaccine if that happens too. Those are not the actions of someone advocating for our kids. Those are the actions of someone advocating for themselves. My kids will not be attending Plank North next year. I'm going to send them to private school where I know that they're going to receive the education that they deserve, where they will be in school all day, and where they don't have to wear a mask. And that's a pretty smart virus that only comes into public schools and not private. 2 of your longtime board members lost their seats. That should tell you something. Parents are not taking a back seat anymore. And if my information is correct, there's some seats coming up next year. And I hope that you keep a chair warm for me because I'm coming for one of them.
Thank you.
Mark Agor.
I wrote this on my way. Leaving work tonight, I don't even want to read this. I just want to speak from the heart and essentially tell you, personally, I think the way you guys have acted in the last couple weeks, I think has been very great. And I appreciate that. And the fact that you guys are watching us and listening to us, that also means a lot too. Oh, I'm sorry. So the fact that you guys are listening to us and watching to us, I appreciate all that. So personally, just I'm a conservative, and I don't want to live in this state anymore. I've had it. Like I'm done being masked. I'm done worrying about if my kids are going to get shots. And I'm pretty committed here. I got 3 businesses. A couple commercial buildings, a couple residential houses, and I've researched what it's going to cost to start buying buildings down south and houses, and it's going to cost a couple $1 million for me to move. And the last thing I want to do is move, period. Okay? Personally, right now, I don't want to say this as a threat, but I feel you guys all need to become our target. Because either you need to fight with us, okay, or you need to fight against us, okay? And I want you to fight with us. I don't want to fight anymore. I'm done fighting. But if you think I'm going to move out of this state and not go out swinging, I'm fighting hard. And I'm fighting for my family. I'm fighting for my kids. I'm fighting for my employees. I'm fighting for my nieces and nephews. I don't want to leave this state. I love this state. The last couple of years has been horrible, you know? And to me, I just please, like, I know you guys can talk to other people in Monroe County, other Board of Education members. Like, if we all bring the pressure to the higher ups, something is gonna happen. But if we sit here and you guys say there's nothing we can do, we have nothing we can do. You guys say there's nothing you can do. You guys can band together. You can put pressure on Mendoza. Mendoza can put pressure on Cuomo. You know, we have to band together. I cannot go for the passports. Like, the vaccine passport, not doing it. If that happens, like, I'm literally ready to lose it. My wife up there doesn't really say much, and as you guys know, I'm pretty vocal. So, and when she tells me to stand back, I listen to her, okay? We were at dinner last night, and she literally said to me, she said, come September, I'm ready to lose it. And when that woman's ready to lose it, like, you've pushed us all too far. And it's not, like, I understand you guys got stuff, so, but we need to band together. We need to take Monroe County down. And to me, like, I don't want you to be our target. I want you to be the target so we can fight together. So, you know, that's it. And again, Mr. Neenan, I think you've done a very good job, and I appreciate everything you've been doing. So, thank you.
Thank you. Joe LaCusa.
Microphones only for short people? We don't. Thank you. And I echo what he said, Brian. Thank you. So my message today is directed to both the board as well as the families in the district who still may be terrified to send their kids to school or they want them to wear masks. I simply ask everybody here to just open up to what I'm about to say for the next 3 minutes, and I'll offer you the same courtesy. My message today is simple. Our kids are safe to go back to school, and they're safe to not wear masks, and it's time to get back to normal. And I know that gives some anxiety, but it shouldn't, because when mask mandates were first implemented, we knew very little. We originally thought the virus spread by droplets in close contact with each other, and this was the #1 justification for masking and keeping kids out of school. However, as we learned more, we found strong evidence that this virus spreads mostly by aerosols, not droplets. This info can be found anywhere you trust to find information, whether it's the World Health Organization, the CDC, or the National Institute of Health. You can find it. The importance of this finding cannot be overstated. All current evidence points to the virus being airborne, which blows away any need for social distancing, masks, and surface cleaning. This explains why mask mandates and other non-pharmaceutical interventions have done nothing to stop the spread of the virus. This information can be found in multiple studies, and it's widely accepted by the medical community, even the CDC, which guides the New York State Department of Health. To say it differently, what we used to think about COVID turned out to be false, and universal masking was a result of those mistakes. That's why no matter how hard you may try today, you cannot find any conclusive evidence showing that masks helped stop the spread or that they protected you or your kid in any way. It even states right on the CDC website, and I'll read it to you verbatim. It says, SARS-CoV-2 is a novel pathogen, and growing evidence indicates the possibility of airborne transmission. Recommendations to wear masks to protect the wearer from droplet infections are based on the assumption that droplets travel short distances only. Then they go on to say, however, the protective efficiency of such masks against airborne transmissions of infectious severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS-CoV-2, both droplet and aerosols, is unknown. In other words, proof that masks work does not exist. Now, some of you may be thinking, hey, the CDC says kids need to wear masks. You know, well, you may be surprised to hear that the CDC is a bunch of unelected bureaucrats that are filled with highly partisan individuals who are led by money, not science. Thousands of experts with much higher credentials than the folks at the CDC or even Dr. Fauci have spoken out against these outdated mandates and arbitrary rules still guiding our school plans, and you guys are following them. It's time to adapt to new information that I just shared with you that exists. Have any of you ever eaten a steak that's not well done, or maybe a sunny side up egg, or even fed your children juice or milk or yogurt or cheese while you just defied the CDC? That's a no-no. The science says it's okay to take masks off. That's what the science says, and open schools fully, just like they have in parts of the States and Europe and all over the world without issue. I'm here fighting against irrational thinking and politics because that's what's driving these decisions, not science. We need to collectively fight against these mandates. And I'll say it again, our kids are safe. Vaccinated teachers are safe. Here's a fact you probably didn't know. Anyone under the age of 18 today who is not vaccinated is statistically safer from COVID than a vaccinated person over the age of 30, and 100 times safer than a person over the age of 75. So let that sink in. I'll say it again. Children who aren't vaccinated are safer than vaccinated people who now have no mask mandates. Does that make sense? We've been duped, and we've been conditioned to believe that your kids are in danger, and they aren't. And it's time we follow the truth and drop these stupid rules. And I beg you to see past the politics, and for God's sakes, turn off CNN. So to close, I want to say that I want to help bridge the gap between nervous families, teachers, and frustrated parents like me who simply want our kids to go back to school full-time and back to normal for their own health and sanity. We are charging towards a mental health crisis, and that will dwarf any minuscule risk we have with COVID. By not thinking rationally, you're hurting my kids as well as your own. So come see me if you're scared. Let's talk. And I'm also calling out the board. Let's find a new forum that allows open dialogue. This lack of back and forth communication with the parents is unacceptable. We need more transparency and more options for our parents to speak to the board and to each other. Thank you. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Reed Summers.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'm here to talk about the size of our elementary school classrooms. Not as controversial a subject as perhaps mask restrictions, but actually a much longer-term problem and more relevant to education. Our numbers are striking: 25 kids in K through 3 and 26 in 4th and 5th grades. If we think about that, 25 first graders in one room built for 15 kids with one teacher. Not all buildings reach the cap every year, but many do, and high densities are a chronic issue that will only get worse with changing demographics and unbridled property development. Let me share an anecdote to illustrate the point. My wife and I have a 4th grader, my wife's here, at Clem South. For the first 8 months of the year, he was having a ball. He liked his teacher, got along well with the other 12 members of his class. Compared to previous years, his classroom was quieter, better organized, less distracting. The teacher had time to give him the individual attention he needed. In a word, he was thriving. Then the district decided to reopen and add 13 students to each room. This was discouraging not just from an educational standpoint, but from a public health perspective. How could the district pack unvaccinated kids into classes 70% over capacity and still meet the DOH's 3-foot distancing rule? The trick we learned was measuring students not desk to desk, but nose to nose. This meant that K through 5 kids could safely distance only if they faced forward and held their heads perfectly still. Obviously, science was out the window, but more distressing was watching the quality of our son's educational experience deteriorate. Despite his teacher's best efforts to manage 26 kids, noise increased, distractions multiplied, and individual attention was consumed by behavior management. Today, after 5 weeks, it is safe to say that our son might have learned more in 2 hours than he does now in 5. He deserves better, along with his classmates and his teacher. Many parents wonder why the problem has gotten this bad. The answer, as far as I can tell, is that caps are set not in state regs, but in the CBA. This means that in each contract negotiation, there is a kind of Faustian bargain. The district has not made it a priority, and secondary faculty outnumber elementary faculty 2 to 1. So space for our youngest learners is basically controlled by secondary teachers who either ignore it or auction it off for pay and benefits. This unfairly impacts elementary teachers and students and cries out for Board of Education reform. Let me be blunt. If educational quality is a priority, and I believe it is for this board, you should never allow caps to be horse-traded in this manner. You have the authority, and I would submit the obligation, to lower elementary class size and elevate K-5 kids over turf fields, pay raises, and fancy improvement projects. I am hopeful that Superintendent Neenan will embrace this initiative. While some meta-studies average K-5 class reduction benefits with less pronounced secondary outcomes, there is a large body of K-5 research supporting it. We all know in our bones that reduced primary classes improve student achievement. Even Hattie concedes, with proper pedagogic adjustments, that smaller classes, like a rising tide, lift all students. So I urge this board and Superintendent Neenan to craft a new CSR policy and restack the budget to make it a priority. Our elementary students, parents, and teachers are depending on you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I believe. So we did decide, excuse me, if there were people that signed up to speak and not within this allotted time, because we do have business that we have to conduct, that you're free to visit with Krista Gross and sign up, and you can speak at the end of the meeting. We'll stick around, and whoever wants to speak can do so. So moving on to the interim superintendent's report.
Okay. First of all, I'm going to start out with a thank you. Thank you for tonight. This is the way I know. This is what gets me excited about our community. I know we've had disagreements. I know we've had challenges. None of us here, I think I can speak on behalf of the board, are here to say that we haven't and look the other way on any of that. But this is the way we can do it, and I really appreciate the demeanor, and we want to hear you, and tonight this is a perfect example for our kids and a perfect example as all of our adults in our community of this is how we can do it. So my gratitude for all of our speakers tonight that have spoken, and for all of you being here and being attentive and civic and everything else that we need. So first of all, that's my first part, and thank you so much. Okay, my first interim board report. I want to start out with a thank you to our community for approving our budget, and also I want to welcome two of our new board members that will begin on July 1st. They are right over here, Shanna Ladelfa and Jennifer Birdsong Ng. Welcome to the board as of July. I also want to say a heartfelt thank you to Mike Suffoletto and Sue Casey. You guys have given us many years of wisdom and many years of dedicated time, and the effort and the amount of time that you put into this job, which is a voluntary job, and we all know that is much appreciated. I know I'm looking over here to Sue, but I got to look over here to Mike. So thank you both very, very much. All right, and then at the last meeting, one of the things that we discussed is where are we going? You know, what is our plan? And I know that some of our community really wants to know that we have a plan and have thoughts. And I'm appreciative of many of our principals and administrators that are some of them in the back tonight, and some of them aren't able to be here. But they've been working very hard to make sure that whatever is thrown at us next year, we can handle. So if you want to bring us to the next page. So I'm going to do 3 parts of this. It'll be, the first part is, we're going to take a little walk back in history just to make sure we have everything kind of understanding. And then we'll look at what we're doing this current school year, and then obviously the bigger part will be about what we're planning for next year. So spring and summer of 2020. If you want to go to the next slide, Paul, that'd be great. Just to take us back. I don't want to take us back because this has been a challenging year. I really want to go forward, but just to make sure You know, it was this time last year, and we were in the middle of a beginning of stages of the pandemic, and we were working with staff, working with students, and working with families to try and figure out what we were being told. So people were giving us information, and we were trying to create schedules and whatnot. It came to our attention that we couldn't do a remote and a hybrid learning environment for middle school and for high school without changing schedules for those two levels. And then we also had to change at the elementary and did AM and PM. Well, for the middle school and the high school, that meant changing to an 8-period schedule. That hurts us. That ended up hurting us in April when the CDC told us that if we were above 100 count, we had a cohort. And that was one of the things I know I explained in the last meeting. But next year, we're not going to be in that situation. If for some reason we are still under the same mandates that we're under now, we want to be able to make sure that we can cohort at the middle and the high. Much easier at the middle school. There is challenges at the high school, but we are getting creative. I know our programmer and our data expert, Eric Blask, is actually writing a program right now and working with a couple of other districts to make sure that we can do that, so that we can contract trace and whatever we need to do to adhere to that. Again, we used our care expectations to teach and support students' needs, and that was, again, a great thing. Paul, if you want to push on to the next slide, that'd be great. And again, I've talked about a few of these things that are on this slide, but again, it was about scheduling for teachers. So in our secondary schools, about 80% of our teachers actually taught somewhere in the vicinity of 3 or 4 classes in person, in hybrid, and then had a section of remote. Again, we were in a very different financial situation at the beginning of this when we had to make these decisions, and we did make those decisions so that we could offer a remote school, a middle school hybrid, and a high school hybrid. So just, again, making sure that we're all aware of that. And then we ended up having to pivot, obviously, is what the last piece of that said. But now let's start thinking about forward. All students in person, full-time next year is what we all want. And thank you, Mark, for when you were saying your words. We want to work with you to make this happen as well. And I'll get to a slide a little bit in just a second, and Tammy and I will talk a little bit about advocacy efforts. In order to do this, we are going to return back to our 2019-2020 schedules for middle school and our 2019-2020 schedules for high school. So we won't have what we have right now, which is the 8-period schedule for both of those levels. We're going to go back to that because at the middle school, it allows us to team, and at the high school, it gives opportunities for our kids, and we can get creative around creating potential cohorts and teams in the background. It also will allow us to, if we needed to provide the 6-foot music and lunch, which is currently in the regs, and we want to make sure that we're planning for that. Those are tricky. Sometimes that is a situation where we might have to use staffing to do that, but we're prepared to do that. And we'll be able to cohort at the secondary level. We are set to respond to the changes. What we've talked about as an administrative team is we want to think about everything. I don't want to have to do hybrid again ever. But if for some reason something happened, we want to be prepared for that. Again, I hope we never have to do that. Again, it's about being prepared. I hope my message is coming across tonight that we want to be prepared for whatever it comes at us so we can pivot when we need to. Well, in order to do that, we've got to make sure that we invest some money this summer in our professional development, in our curriculum writing for our staff. And part of that is a question that was asked at the last board meeting is to make sure that we can meet students' needs. We know that there's going to be a variety of needs for students. Some have excelled and some have not, and we need to be able to make sure that we can address those, each of those individual students. Okay, how can you help? I'm actually going to start, if you don't mind, Tam. Is this when you want to talk? Do you want to talk about the letter right now? Or do you want to? Sure. Yeah, why don't we do that? Because from the board's perspective, I actually had a meeting today with several other area superintendents. We met and we talked about ways and things that, many of the things that you're asking for tonight, in your words, we are doing and we are doing right now, live time, so to speak, in the sense it was today. It was yesterday for boards of education and presidents, and Tammy actually can talk about a letter that they've written.
Right, so we attended a webinar for Kirsten Gillibrand's office and Senator Schumer's office, and kept asking. We know that all of this is rolled out, and all we've been able to do is react to it. There are very, very strong liability issues to not following New York State Department of Health guidelines. And I know it's frustrating, but we are not in a position to disregard those guidelines. So what we're doing is we're asking them, tell us, create some clear guidelines, some clear channels of communication, clear channels of authority, so that if we ever find ourselves in any situation like this again, we know what's going to happen. And we're not telling our communities in 2-week increments or whenever guidance changes how it's going to impact your children. So obviously, this has never been, this isn't a situation that's worked for anyone. We've never experienced a pandemic in our lifetime. So the time that was required for the research to happen was happening as it unfolded. I do believe that the people in charge were doing their best. I do believe that people have different points of view. That's all valid. That's why we live in this country. However, in public education, there are certain guidelines and parameters that we do have to adhere to. So what we want to do collectively going forward is say, we are listening to our community. I wrote a letter. It's shared across Monroe County. We're asking you to sign it. We're going to send letters, a good old-fashioned letter writing campaign. It's not an email petition or anything like that. I'm going to buy the stamps the first time around, and we're going to see where this goes, because they have to listen and understand that although things happened a certain way this year, we cannot let this happen again. So the letters are here. You're welcome to take one and sign it. Please give them, I suppose, anywhere. A table by the exit would be great. We will take care of mailing them to both. And it's actually, you know, I know people have wanted us to write letters and be angry and do certain things. That wasn't going to change the guidance. That wasn't going to change the governor's mind. So what we did is we managed as best we could. So here's our opportunity to say, this year was what it was. There have been good things that happened, and there's been great challenges. So we just want to prepare so that we always can do better in the future. So please sign.
This is just the first round. There's other things that we can do, and there's more of this that we can do. This is just I think it's a way of us, I think the school board is showing that they want to do something too. And that's the same thing with the superintendents. And we are doing the same thing. Again, ideas were coming, it's not just, it's about masking, it's about vaccinations, it's about remote school, it's about, you know, giving us the guidance now. We need it now in order to plan and whatnot. And so those are the types of things that are all
Right, so we
parts of
can
these
plan
topics.
for a full reopening in the fall.
Yeah, full.
And as I say,
full.
I don't think anyone in this room, well, as we've been part of these discussions, has felt at any point that we really had a choice. And so, yes, we want kids back in school. We're a school district. This is what we do. We never wanted anyone to be in a position that they didn't want to be in. However, now we have guidance. Now we have somebody saying, listen, this is something you can do. We'll listen to your community. Please have them participate, and we'll put our best effort forward.
And it goes back to some of the things that you guys were saying and providing us. Joe, I love the research that you've done. I really would love that. It's great for me to have in front of me when I'm talking to other superintendents and we're advocating. I mean, things like that. Those are the pieces that are helpful.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. We'll keep moving on in the agenda.
I got to just finish my
Okay.
report.
You can
I'm
finish
sorry.
your
Yep,
report.
thank
I'm
you.
sorry. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
and then other things that we put on the slide that I'm sure you've already read, again, ways that you can continue to help us and help each other is play, read, enjoy, do whatever it is that you do as a family. Continue to do those types of things because it's good for you, it's good for the kids, and it certainly is a role modeling that we can get through all of this, the challenges that we're in front of, especially like I've said it many, many times, and I will try to continue to repeat this if we do it together. And last, I just want to start something new, I guess, if you will. I think we want to do a campus news is how I want to end each of my reports. And I'm just taking a couple different pieces of news from the campus and sharing them with you. So tonight, I want to share with you a great celebration that we had at our goal. It was a goal prom. And it was, you can see the date right there on it, was May 14th. I actually had an opportunity to go to that, and wow, what a great event. I know Mrs. Safe is here with us. I really applaud her and her team of teachers and staff members that put this event on for the kids. It's such a great event every year, and I think it's now maybe, it's been a couple years that they've been doing this, I know, but what a great night, and thank you very much, Mrs. Oh, I'm sorry, this is our goal, and which is our growth and opportunity alternative, our alternative school at the high school. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's a great event.
Great program.
And actually, I think I saw some of you here at this event. This is something that was co-sponsored by our Webster PTSA and our Webster WTA, and it was our first annual Luminary Walk that we did at the Webster Recreation Center for approximately 700 of our seniors. It was really neat, not only to bring the students and their families. What they did is they walked around a mile track, if you will, and it was lined with teachers, and it was lined with our administrative staff, and it was just a wonderful night. It was a perfect temperature night, and it was a great way to get families out together. I think the other thing that I personally loved about it the most, and I've told this to both Paul and Glenn, is that it was done together with Thomas and Schrader. And it was such a great One Webster opportunity. So thank you both to all of our high school staff, and again, both to PTSA and WTA for making that. I think that's something that will stick from this year. So, and then lastly, Mr. M from Clem South in DeWitt, he's actually shared, he's one of our music teachers. He sent this to us, and he said, as much as it's been a hard year for art and music at the elementary level, because of the situation that we've been in, he got really creative, and you're going to like this. It's about a 30-minute clip. Let's play that, Paul. They're 30 seconds, sorry. That's great. Thank you so much. And that ends my report.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, moving on. We did amend to add the settlement agreement and a due process hearing regarding a child in the district. Can we have a motion, please, to accept the settlement agreement as presented to us?
So moved.
And a second? Mike? Thank you, Sue. All in favor?
Aye.
It's so hard to see everyone. Thank you very much. Okay. And moving on to the treasurer's report, we have a few. We've all had a chance to review all this information, so I will only ask for questions. Does anybody have questions about the January report as presented by Brian Freeman? Are you okay? Do you want to add anything?
You have executive summaries for all 3 months,
So if we go through, does anyone have questions? Who is it? Sorry. About February? March? Okay. Barring any questions, can we have a motion, please, to accept the treasurer's reports as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Linda, second? Maria? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Moving on to a change order. Brian will walk us through Billeteer Electric.
So yes, this has to do with construction at Schrader High School. It's a change order. The dollar amount is over the state threshold, so the board has to approve it. We added some scope. If you remember, we rebid Schrader to do more work within the dollars because the bids came in so favorable. So as we were walking through, we decided also to adjust the electrical contract and go with some new LED lighting in many of the rooms, replaced all the electrical switches as well. So this change order is in addition to their contract. It needs board approval because it is over the threshold before we send it on to SED for approval.
Any questions for Brian? Okay, can we have a motion, please, to accept the change order?
So moved.
Sue, second by Mike. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Motion carries. And moving on to the SECRA resolution.
Sure. This, with the recent passing of the school budget, the transfer to capital that was approved is for construction work at Clem North for next year, starting in July. But to get that approved at the state level, we just are solidifying with this resolution that the work we're doing has no major environmental impact. It is gutter work. We're not really doing too much that would impact anything. So this is a resolution stating as such our work creates no environmental impact for the community.
Thank you. Any questions, anyone? Okay, can we have a motion, please, to accept the SECRA resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Linda, second. By Suff, all in favor? All right, thank you. Moving on to the first reading of the draft calendar of the Board of Education. So typically we have a public business meeting and a workshop each month. And some items are already decided, for example, long-range financial planning. There are certain things that we have to do at certain times throughout the year. So this being said, it isn't completely populated with the topics that we'll choose to discuss, but for the first reading, does anybody have any questions, or are we okay passing this? I know we have some work to do. Can we have a motion, please, to accept the first reading? Suff, thank you. Second? Mike, okay. All in favor? Thank you. And moving on to the first reading of Policy 3180, Family Medical Leave.
Yes, we had a policy meeting on, I believe it was April 22nd, and this was one of our last recommendations that we're going to be making this year. The family leave policy, we would like to amend that by eliminating the references to regulation, just to keep things simple and to keep things going in the trajectory that we had talked about previously. All that information will be included in the regulation from going forward. So tonight would be the first read.
Your mic's not on.
I'm lit. Hi.
There we
Okay.
go.
Can we have a motion, please, to accept the changes to the family medical? Maria, second. I see Janice down there. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. We move on now to the consent agenda, which are items that we've all had a chance to review, minutes of previous meetings, personnel actions, recommendation of the Committee on Special Education meetings, recommendations of the Committee on Preschool Special Education Committee meetings. Can we have a motion, please, to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Sue, and a second? Suf, all in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. So at this point, we would adjourn. However, if there were additional people, Krista, do we have a couple names who wanted to address the board? You're free to
Jennifer.
do so.
Jennifer Van Sika would like to address.
Okay.
Here she is.
Hi, good evening. My name's Jennifer Fonseca. Some of you may recognize me or my name, as I was a latecomer to run for the Board of Education last week. I have much understanding and knowledge about the ideas and social issues that are plaguing our nation. our state, and our community. Our current culture and issues need to incorporate teaching that will last a lifetime and for future generations. It needs to be built on high expectations for excellency, hard work, morals and values, and success into all parts of our community and society. Instead, we are moving towards a socialist radicalism that is creating a culture of hate. At the last school board meeting on May 6th, a parent brought up a question. She asked, and I quote, "I wanted to bring up about bringing critical race theory to the schools. Could you give a brief word on what that might entail? And if you are bringing it in September, is it part of the curriculum?" Unquote. There was a brief hesitancy, and then she asked a question, "Then did you not hear of it?" Unquote. Mr. Neenan's response was, and this is quoting from what he said, "You're saying you heard this from the district, just the media, or just in general you're saying? Right now, it's about training our teachers in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have been doing this for the last couple of years. Yes, that's where we are at in the district," unquote. I have, over the last few months, and now the last couple of weeks, have seen and heard evidence that critical race theory is already here in Webster Central School District. Based on the district's website, speaking with parents and grandparents, and even speaking with a high school student who shared a personal story of being part of conversations and classroom teachings every single day. On May 6, 2021, the New York State Department of Education released a memo in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion to all public schools and higher education in the state of New York. The first part of this memo describes all district schools and classrooms should have already been doing what they've already been doing and providing an excellent education through, quote, responsive teaching and learning to all students in regards to pedagogical practices, professional development, classroom groupings, practices, and student support systems. This is educators speak for teach kids what they need, when they need it, and at the level of entry of learning in order to grow academically. This isn't anything new in the world of education, as it should be what it should be happening in the classroom. But the memo goes on with some guidelines of what this should look like. It also includes a link to the New York State Ed Department website titled Culturally Responsive Sustaining Education, in which it states, and I quote, "For more than a century, education providers throughout the United States have strived and struggled to meet the diverse needs of American children and families. A complex system of biases and structural inequities is at play, deeply rooted in our country's history, cultures, and institutions. This system of inequity, which routinely confers advantage and disadvantage based on linguistic background, gender, skin color, and other characteristics, must be clearly understood, directly challenged, and fundamentally transformed. This is critical race theory. This is not teaching children how to read, write, become proficient in mathematics and other academic areas in order to become productive members in the workforce and community." And by the way, I worked 16 years overseas in Honduras with populations of low socioeconomic students. I also worked in the inner city with Hispanic and African American students. So this has been my life dedication of working in schools and in communities and worldwide with kids of other races and ethnic backgrounds. But my purpose and intent for tonight is to notify and make our taxpayers, parents, and community aware and educate them on what is truly happening in our schools, and state, as I can interpret, that this is happening based on the response provided in the last board meeting. Critical race theory is alive and moving forward here in Webster schools. It is being pushed down to our youngest students who cognitively are not capable of understanding these teachings, and it will therefore just become a part of who they are, indoctrination, because that is what adult political agendas are teaching. We need to be aware of what to look for that might result in teacher language, activities, and even in the computer programs that are being used in our classrooms, as critical race theory is invading all aspects of our daily life, and it's being pushed as the right thing to do to address what is known as racism. In fact, it's becoming the new institutional orthodoxy or religion. So let me just quote and end this with a publication by Christopher Rufo, which was published in March of 2021. For those of you, and especially those watching in the community, I had a lot of people call me, email me, and they're still calling me. What is critical race theory? It's a Marxist left political program on the theory of class conflicts. Marx believed that the primary characteristics of industrial society was the imbalance of power between capitalists and workers. The solution to that imbalance, according to Marx, was revolution. The workers would eventually gain consciousness in their plight, seize the means of production, overthrow the capitalist class, and usher in a new socialist society. During the 20th century, a number of regimes under Marxist-style revolutions each ended in disaster. Socialist governments such as the Soviet Union, China, Cambodia, Cuba, Venezuela, and elsewhere racked up a body count of nearly 100 million of their own people. In practice, Marx's ideas unleash man's darkest brutalities. Critical race theory is an academic discipline built to the intellectual framework of identity-based Marxism. It has increasingly become the default ideology in our public institutions. It has been injected into government agencies, public school systems, teacher training programs, and at all levels in our society through diversity training. There are a series of euphemisms deployed by its supporters to describe critical race theory, including equity, social justice, diversity and inclusion, and culturally responsive teaching. Have you heard those terms already being used by our district? Critical race theorists, masters of language construction, realize that neo-Marxism would be a hard sell. Equity, on the other hand, sounds non-threatening and is easily confused with the American principle of equality, but the distinction is vast and important. Indeed, equality, the principle proclaimed in the Declaration of Independence, defended in the Civil War, codified into law with the 14th and 15th Amendments, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and the Voting Act rights of 1965, is explicitly rejected by critical race theorists. To them, equality represents mere non-discrimination and provides camouflage for white supremacy, patriarchy, and oppression. In contrast to equality, equity as defined and promoted by critical race theorists is little more than reformulated Marxism. I want to give you some examples of how it's just growing across the United States. In California, in Cupertino, California, elementary schools force first graders to deconstruct their racial and sexual identities and rank themselves according to their power and privilege. In Springfield, Missouri, a middle school forced teachers to locate themselves on an oppression matrix. In Webster, New York, first graders were asked to identify their sexual pronouns of how they felt that day. That came from a parent that I met. Recently, I learned implicit race tests is being given to every ninth grader in this district. It is a survey where they find out if they are racist. One child was an Asian American. She is racist against Asians. Excuse me? Comes to find out, just about every child who took that test, every ninth grader, they are still children. Their brains are not fully developed, were found to be racist. I'm appalled. There's thousands of more. This is a revolutionary change. Today, under the increasing sway of critical race and related ideologies, they are being turned. Our children are being turned. We are all being turned against the American people.
Thank you. Krista, was there anyone else wishing? Sir, do you wish to address the board?
One more, David Ruiz.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and blessings, and to the board and superintendent and everybody here. It's the first time I've been to one of these. It's been years. I used to be involved where I used to live, so obviously something's happening that got me involved again. But just to piggyback on her, I wasn't going to say anything about that, but my grandson did graduate a few years ago here, and they were on a field trip once to the Strong Museum. They had a professor there who was helping out with your teacher. And I grilled my grandson 3 times to make sure I got this right, but I will paraphrase what the professor uttered. And he dealt with race and racism in America. And basically, the paraphrasing would be that the professor said it will be a good day for America when in 20 or 30 years, by 2050, whites will no longer be a minority. So there was, I don't know how many seniors were there. My grandson said they were kind of appalled at that. And only a couple kids asked the question because it took them back. But anyways, so this happened. It's real. And some people really believe that. I don't know what's happening to America. Somebody else, I'm not going to say their name, but they're about 30 years old, and when Columbus Days come around, he's got one word for Columbus: an a-hole. You know, it's unbelievable, but it's coming from somewhere. You know, there's an attack on how we got here and our foundations. You know, we've disestablished religion in our country. Now I think we're trying to disestablish our Constitution in our own way. So, but at any rate, it's happening. I don't know at what level it's happening. One of the things in my old district, it was told that Harvard did a study on school boards and their efficiency and how well what makes a good school board. They found that when they're homogeneous, when they vote more often in the same block or of the same party, same mentality, it suffers. The best school boards are school boards that are diverse and have votes to show it. So as people were speaking to you about the mask, I don't know where you all fit into this. I don't know if you're all of the same cloth. I don't know if you've all buckled under the idea that we've got to go, for instance, by what someone else tells us. I kind of disagree with that. I'm hoping and praying that there's a few of you that have a voice. I have not. I personally would like to know what each one of you would do come September as far as masks, given that even if we stay the same and it's not quite given the green light but not the red light, if it's just like today, I'm wondering what each of you are pushing for. I doubt any of you want the masks, but if things stay the same, I don't know who's really fighting and just kicking back. You mentioned the word, getting sued. That's a big deal. You're right. But if the science is behind some of the things that you guys have been saying, for instance, somebody's going to go to a private school. Why? Well, they don't have masks. Why don't they sue you for that? Why don't you pay their bill? If somebody's good, I know another person who's had to have private counseling for their daughter. Why couldn't she sue and saying, hey, this is contributing it? So lawsuits can go both ways. So, and I understand it's a big deal. You got to face that, but it can come from the other side, and I don't know how much of that we're hiding. You can hide behind it. I think everything's been okay for now. I mean, it's been a crazy year, but the next step, can we push not to have the masks? And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe that concludes the business portion of the meeting. Can we have a motion, please, to adjourn? Linda, second by Suff. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate and would like to see your advocacy in helping us move forward as a district. Please leave your letters to the site and we'll take care of them. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.